Valencia was a hot city circuit, awash with glamour. Not everyone's cup of tea.
This place is a very, very boring street track.
There was a blow for one title challenger as another danced to victory. And now, Spa, and a serious case of déjà vu. "12 months ago, an Englishman battled a Brazilian for the world title, and for one of them, what a battleground this track became. However, here, in fact, right here at the bus stop, it was Felipe Massa's teammate Kimi Raikkonen causing Lewis Hamilton the problems. But by this point, Lewis had given the place back. Lewis's battle with Kimi eventually ended at La Source. About here. But his battle with the stewards had hardly begun. Lewis went on to win the race. But after they got involved, he was demoted to third. Massa was given the win. Well, it's a different Englishman and a slightly more experienced Brazilian this year. But where better for the Battle of the Brawns to commence? The trendy beaches and guaranteed sunshine of Valencia quickly seems like an alien environment. Welcome to F1 Heartland in the heart of the Ardennes forest. Over 4 miles of challenging tarmac, the names of the corners as famous as the memories they've given us. Eau Rouge may get the headlines, but the fast left of Blanchimont and the challenges of Pouhon and Stavelot are just as fearsome. It's a classic racing circuit with the atmosphere to boot. And in 2 weeks' time it'll be just as passionate, if a little more partisan, as we arrive in Ferrari land for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, before 4 long-haul flights complete the 2009 season with F1's first day-night race in Abu Dhabi. And Red Bull's Mark Webber believes the run-in favours Brawn GP, which will be music to the ears of the leaders. Jenson Button and Rubens Barrichello are setting the pace. Webber and Sebastian Vettel are still in the hunt. And we know who the constructors' title is between. But what about the race for third spot? Ferrari have it, McLaren and Williams, well, they both want it, as do Toyota. And we're here for qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix from Spa, right outside the Toyota garage. Question marks over their future. We'll discuss that later on in today's programme. But let's have a chat to both of our guys who know just how it feels to be successful at this fantastic old race circuit. But we can't just talk all day about how wonderfully you both did during your careers, David. Let's start with 1998, when you created a special memory for you and also the rest of the field you were racing against that day.
Well, yeah, obviously a couple of incidents here. As we see the run down to the first corner, you can see I'm caught in the middle there between a Williams and a Ferrari. And as we go round La Source at the start of this very wet Grand Prix, and in the run down out of La Source, in the mist there, I said I got tipped on the rear by Eddie Irvine, but the reality is I just dropped a wheel onto the metal grille, lost control, speared into the wall, and then you can see all havoc broke loose behind me. So very uncomfortable moments of a Grand Prix, but thankfully most of those cars were able to make the restart.
And what's it like sitting in a stationary car when you know that there are a lot of cars about to slide into the back of you? What's that like?
It's the worst feeling for a driver, and you know, my car here is obviously spinning over to the left-hand side of the circuit, and at that moment I'm thinking, good, I'm against the barrier, I'm not going to get T-boned by someone else. But as you can see, all hell breaks loose behind, and it just highlights how difficult it is for these drivers to see anything in this spray. So there's a presumption that you're on a straight, therefore everyone else is going to be going flat out. And there we see later after the restart, Michael Schumacher trying to mate a Ferrari with a McLaren, and
this gives an idea of how bad the visibility is. You can hardly see the accident in that shot, can you?
Yeah, and that's the thing. The front shots never do it justice. And then Michael's coming down to arrange a dinner appointment, I think, for later, if I remember correctly. Actually, as you can see, I still had my helmet on, so I felt very confident that if the mechanics weren't there to hold him back, I would have been able to take a punch. But
oh, he's a brave man, Eddie, and it was a brave drive by a couple of your drivers in the same race. Thanks to that crash with Schumacher, you ended up getting your first win.
Well, I wouldn't like to think that I owe something to David here, but actually the mayhem, as you saw, it was just an epic weekend. It was classic, huge shunt, no one injured, which was fantastic. And of course we had our first one too. It was historic. I'd noticed that Ron Dennis was climbing on my back there trying to get in on the photo opportunity, but we'll leave that to another day to talk about.
And you've hardly aged a bit as well. Quite remarkable, that is.
That did cause my heart to flutter. I'd have to tell you, the aggravation I had trying to get Ralph Schumacher to understand that he was not allowed to pass Damon Hill, and then the grief I had from his brother as a result of that later on. Michael went clearly berserk with me. The team had to come first, and that's what happened. It
was Jordan's day, but we can't have Eddie take all the plaudits for doing well here. What's it like for a driver to be on pole and take the win as you did just a year after that big accident?
Well, this is one of the classic Grand Prix tracks. It's been on the calendar since the 20s, it's been on the Grand Prix calendar since the 50s. So for me to win at this track was just a fantastic feeling, right up there with Monaco and Monza and the British Grand Prix. So that was a great day. Unfortunately, I'd actually touched wheels with Mika at the first corner, so he wouldn't speak to me on the podium because obviously he felt he should win all the Grand Prix.
Well, of course, and he should have done, shouldn't he?
Well, in Finnish logic and in McLaren world, that's obviously what he thought should happen.
Well, yeah, that's what they were all after. All right, fantastic. And let's not forget, of course, that Martin Brundle in 1995, he also came third here. So all of our guys that we've got here this weekend have done very well indeed. Just a quick mention of the weather. We were told no rain all weekend. It then started to rain. It then went very sunny. And now the wind is coming in and the clouds are gathering. So we've seen already this season what happens when it rains during qualifying. We'll keep our eye on that for you. But with just 6 races left this season, it's very much Brawn versus Red Bull. That's quite a remarkable story in itself, but equally remarkable is their fluctuating fortunes. As we've travelled the world, the different tracks and the different temperatures have caused both these teams real problems. So where are they now, and who's looking most likely to have a great title run in? Well, here's Ted Kravitz.
The old guard of McLaren and Ferrari are hot on their heels, but this year's world champion will be driving either a Red Bull or a Brawn. They're the cars that have turned F1's form book on its head, but they each have pros and cons that will be changing the balance of power for the rest of the season. Red Bull gives good grip in high-speed corners. It's a classic Adrian Newey car in that sense, so the RB5 should have the edge here at Spa, at Singapore and at Suzuka in Japan. Any wet race is also good for Red Bull, due to them generating heat quickly into their tyres.
The suspension, especially the rear suspension layout, is particularly different with the pull rod that hasn't been seen in Formula One for probably over 20 years, which allowed them to sculpt the rear end of the car quite aggressively.
By contrast, Red Bull may suffer at Monza, a track that demands good mechanical grip. They also have a Renault engine that's proved unreliable and is limiting Sebastian Vettel's track time. Red Bull have also lost out to McLaren and Ferrari at the race starts.
The Kerr's cars, as they've got themselves sorted out, is a weakness to us, and especially on a first lap, as we've seen on numerous occasions on the run down to the first corner.
The Brawn has mechanical grip to spare, so they'll be strong at Monza and on the infield of Brazil. The Mercedes engine is drivable and reliable, while the drivers can overtake on the brakes. Brawn also gain downforce from their diffuser and suffer less tyre degradation in the hot races.
I think it's just this question of balancing aero performance against mechanical compromise, and we're at a slightly different position than Red Bull. And when you go to a track like Valencia, which is braking, acceleration, slow corner performance, clearly we had an advantage. You come here, which is all high-speed stuff, they seem to have an advantage.
Brawn think they've solved their tyre warm-up problems, but can't be sure until we get to less abrasive tracks. Compared to Red Bull, they struggle over one lap and have trouble arriving at the perfect setup straight away. The Brawn was also compromised by its late switch to the Mercedes engine.
It's forgotten in a sort of mist of time, but we had to put a Mercedes engine into this car very much last minute, and there were things that were not right. The exhaust system layout's not what we want. There's other things that have hindered the aero package, and they'll be solved for next year.
So on paper, Spa, Suzuka and Singapore should favour Red Bull, while Monza and Sao Paulo should play to the Brawn strengths as they defend their championship lead. It's to Jenson Button's relief that the Brawn isn't suffering too badly in the chilly Belgian climate.
We definitely don't have tyre temperature issues. They're actually very warm here. I think it's quite an abrasive asphalt, so we don't have any issues with that here.
It's a totally different track layout, mate. Track temperature, track layout, it's much more flowing here. Valencia's a Tesco's car park, we know that, so our car doesn't really like that.
We're not on the pace of the Red Bulls, especially over one lap. I think our long runs are okay. But a lot of people are struggling here, I think, on their long runs with overheating more than the tyres being too cool.
On balance, the 6 races are going to be pretty even. There's going to be a few for Red Bull and a few for us.
Every race weekend now is almost like an FA Cup final for us. We've got to go really go for it. We've got to go for wins, and we've got to almost throw caution to the wind in the remaining 6 races. If we can take the fight into Abu Dhabi, I'll be quite happy with that.
Well, Christian's FA Cup final gets going very shortly. Make sure that you stick with us, 40 minutes until qualifying begins. But it's interesting that Ted mentions there that really he thinks it's favouring Red Bull the last few races, and Mark Webber's come out and said he thinks it favours Brawn. It just shows that the way that these two teams have been performing over the last few races, it's impossible even for the experts to call how it's going to go, isn't it?
Well, of course, and the variabilities that we have going into each of these weekends, it's so dependent on track temperature, weather conditions, is it going to be wet at any of these races? So I don't think you can call it. Everyone always wants to predict what's going to happen in the future, but let's just tune in and see how the individual races play out.
And when we're wandering around the paddock, it's often a hot topic of conversation, how are the teams going to go? Are they going to have a good weekend or a bad one? And in some ways, Eddie, it's kind of heightened by the fact that it's so tight and so close this season. The smallest differences, the smallest margins knock you right back down. And we saw, Mark Webber in qualifying last week, he was 1/10 away from being 4 places higher.
And indeed, we saw Rubens Barrichello going on to win the race. Not many people forecasted that. I think in all this analogy that you're doing here, you're forgetting one thing. McLaren are right back there, and as indeed are Ferrari. They're going to be in the mix, and they're going to have some little say as to who's going to be the ultimate champion here. My guess is, if I was Jensen, I'd be sitting happy. He has the points. They've got to get it from him. The more changes and different winners of the races helps him. My money is still on Jensen.
Tell us how you think the landscape has changed for Jenson Button in the last 7 days, because he's now racing his teammate primarily for this driver's title. It takes me back to the year 2000 when you were racing your teammate for most of that season for the title. How different is it when it's the guy the other side of the garage that you're up against?
Well, of course, it'll change the atmosphere within the garage, but I think he'll be a lot more comfortable with that because the fight is coming from within, and he has all the information on fuel levels, race setup, how many miles the engine has done, has it lost any power. All of that information is at his fingertips because, of course, it's held within the Brawn database. If he's battling Red Bull, he knows nothing about their strategy, where they are on engines and all of that sort of thing. So there'll be an inner comfort having Rubens as his main contender.
And you mentioned that you think sort of Jensen's in the box seat. He's the man who's got all the power. For the first time in Valencia, he had a car capable of winning a race and didn't get the most of it. He's got a teammate that is now going to be seriously looking to pick up some more wins, and we know that Mark Webber's been the informed driver up until Valencia. It's not going to be easy, this, for Jenson Button for the next 6 races.
Well, Jenson, I'm sure it's going through his mind. Clearly, he was the star performer at the beginning. He won 6 of the 7 races, and he has done really not a lot since then. And mentally, I think, as a world champion, if he is going to be world champion, he wants to go out in a pretty big high, and he doesn't want to just scrape there. And therefore, I think in his mind, he wants to have a couple of really big races. He needs to, for his own cred.
OK, well, a big race coming up this weekend, a big qualifying session coming your way very shortly indeed. But it's not just looking towards qualifying for these drivers at the moment. A lot of them are talking about 2010 next season as well, because most of them have got no idea where they're going to be driving. So to give us the latest with that and the rest of the paddock gossip, here's Lee McKenzie.
Back-to-back races have not slowed down the amount of news coming out of the paddock, but it has restricted the amount of time to solve problems for teams. Sebastian Vettel has admitted he's concerned by the lack of engines he has for the remainder of the season. If he goes over the allocated 8, he'll be forced to take a 10-place grid penalty for every engine he uses.
For sure, the last thing we want is take a penalty. Most likely that means that we will have less mileage available than all the others. But, that's life, so we have to deal with our situation.
It's nothing that he's doing in the car. The failures haven't all been the same. And he's had 4 to Mark's 1, and it's probably 5 too many. But, hopefully we can avoid a penalty between now and the end of the season by, using our engines prudently.
But today it was Mark Webber's turn. He suffered an engine failure in practice 3. The mechanics are frantically working to get the engine changed in time for qualifying. The driver merry-go-round is spinning faster than ever, and it's not just for next season. Rumours are rife that Luca Badoer will be driving in his last race this weekend, and he'll be replaced by fellow Italian Giancarlo Fisichella for Monza.
So far it's just speculation because, there is a lot of rumour about that, and it's actually even nice, but Ferrari didn't call me, so I am foreseeing the driver.
Meanwhile, Kazuki Nakajima has admitted he's not sure of his fate, especially if Williams don't use Toyota engines next season.
My hope is to stay at Williams, but I'm sure there will be a lot of things happening around me, so that's why I need to wait, and I just need to put my result in.
And whether Toyota will be involved at all or follow in the footsteps of BMW at the end of the season is still up for debate and not helping Jarno Trulli's plans. It had been rumoured last week that talks had broken down after he wanted a 2-year deal, whilst his current team would only offer 1 year.
I understand the situation for Toyota and for all employees. I think some decision will be taken later on during the season. We are talking, but obviously I got some contact with our team, but at the moment I think it's too early to say anything.
And what does every F1 driver do after making their debut? Go back to work in a bank? Well, that's exactly what Romain Grosjean did on Tuesday in Geneva.
I'm still working there, and it was very nice to see all the people working with me there and used to see me from Formula 3 to GP2 and now Formula 1.
Most Formula 1 drivers are counting their own money, but you seem to be counting other people's.
Yeah, exactly, at the moment, yes.
And practice saw more debris flying off cars, with the left front spinner thrown off the Ferrari of Luca Badoer. Timo Glock was lucky to escape unscathed.
We'll discuss Luca Badoer's chances this weekend very shortly. We've got to mention this engine situation for Red Bull. David, you're still heavily involved with the team. How much of a concern is this Renault engine and its sort of lack of consistency?
Well, of course, it's a great concern, and they're certainly having more difficulties than some of the other manufacturers. The engine problem today wasn't a total failure, but certainly it's cost them to have to make a change.
And Eddie, Fisi for Ferrari, that's a nice story. We're going to grab hold of him very shortly. What do you think about that?
Well, I wouldn't be certain about it. There's all sorts of complications. We see here that Force India has improved their game a lot. The car is a lot more competitive. My little guess is don't rule out Hülkenberg. He's the young kid in GP2. He's going extremely well. He just happens to be managed by Willy Weber and that whole Michael Schumacher. Don't rule that out. I know how this business works.
OK, well, we'll talk to Force India's Giancarlo Fisichella very shortly, but right now we've got another driver to talk to. Quick mention about BMW. Of course, they've announced they're leaving Formula 1 at the end of this season. They're looking for a buyer at the moment, but good tonic for them. Nick Heidfeld was quickest in the final part of practice earlier on today, so great news for him. And in here is another guy who's also had a whole lot of good news so far this season, Nico Rosberg. Nico, good to see you. Gearing up for qualifying, not long to go now. You raced here in 2005 in GP2. The race was eventually abandoned, but that was sort of a good example of how weather and this incredible track can come together to create some amazing racing weekends.
Yeah, I mean, the history of Spa says it all. I mean, there's been some crazy races here, and it's one of the most exciting tracks we have in the calendar also. Just so fast, and so it's very, very unique. And there's always, something always happens here. I mean, it doesn't matter, something always happens or goes wrong, or I don't know, and so it's always a great race weekend.
Right, let's talk about your season so far. We've seen you in 4th position a few times, 5th as well. You did mention a podium coming into this weekend. After free practice, after running around the circuit, are you still confident that a podium is going to be yours?
Not so much, no. We had a disastrous free practice, and really we're struggling a lot this weekend. I don't know why. Don't know the reasons, because it's quite unusual, because this year we've been always competitive everywhere we go, and here we're just nowhere now. So to be honest, I'm going to be happy if I finish in Q3, so top 10, which is really not good, but that's what we're going for.
Well, you made the top 10 in free practice. Adam Parr, who works for your team, he was asked the other day, is Nico Rosberg going to drive for you? Have you done enough to keep him? He said, ask the driver, don't ask us. So I am asking you, have Williams done enough to keep hold of you for next season?
To be honest, at the moment, still things are still open for me. I haven't decided yet, so I'm still considering everything, but I hope to come to a decision pretty soon.
And your dad, he won the world title with this team. Is there a bit of sentimentality when thinking about what's next?
Not really because of my dad, but because, I mean, Williams really supported me to help me come into F1, and I've been with the team. I mean, I tested for them the first time 7 years ago when I was 17 years old. So we get on really well together, and I respect everybody who's in the team, and so that's, if anything, then that would be the sentimental side.
Great, well, it's your most successful season so far, and it's only, 3/4 of the way through, so good luck today, go well, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us so close to qualifying, very good of him to have a chat, and let's pop back out here and get the thoughts of David and Eddie. A couple of times I've mistaken automatic sliding doors for non-automatic ones and walked straight into them into the paddock. It's worth a mention about sort of Nico's future, because he's just one of many drivers who's trying to work out where to go next, and I mentioned that BMW are pulling out. Nothing seems to be clear. It's getting more and more complicated almost by the week, David, about what's going to happen with these drivers.
Yeah, I suspect that there's a few deals already done, but they're just not sharing them for contractual reasons with other teams. And he says he's got a few options, and anyone who starts a sentence, to be honest with you, well, as opposed to what, he's going to lie to you if he doesn't say that.
But he wouldn't tell me if he was, would he?
Yeah, they can't. He's contracted to Williams, and he may well be ongoing with Williams, I don't know, but I suspect he's already got a deal done and knows where he'll be next year.
What about McLaren? He's good looking, he's pretty quick, he's German, he works perfectly for Mercedes, who's the engine partner for McLaren.
Yeah, but you have to ask the question, is he mentally ready to take on Hamilton? Hamilton, the team at McLaren has been built around Hamilton. That is how the success is now coming to the top. And is Nico Rosberg, is his father and himself and the management team, are they mentally strong enough to be able to take them on? And for me, that's the question.
Well, I think that's a very good point, and I think the reason he's been at Williams for so long is I think it was a Keke Rosberg strategy to give his son time to gain experience away from the real spotlight. And the critical thing is, does he then have the credibility to get the big step up to a team that will deliver a race-winning car? And at the moment, it looks like he has got that.
The other question is, why would McLaren upset the apple cart? They've got Lewis Hamilton, who's certainly the quickest driver there at the moment, and he seems to be happy with that partnership. Why would you mess with that?
Well, you can only win the World Championship with one driver. And I think they've a very good setup. If it was me and I was advisor to Nico Rosberg, he's clearly number one at Williams. I'd stay there for another year, gain the experience, because there's too much confusion going on at the moment. We have to yet see where Alonso goes. He's the key person. He opens the door. And once that happens, then there's mayhem.
OK, well, there's a rather rare sight of sun breaking through the clouds here at Spa happens. Of course, having a fast driver and a fast car is one thing, but picking the right strategy at the right time is also crucially important. And for years in Formula One, it's kind of happened up and down the paddock and in the headquarters in sort of a clandestine way until now, because we managed to get exclusive access to McLaren in Valencia, not just at the racetrack, but also 800 miles away at their base in Woking, where there were people poring over exactly the same figures. It's quite remarkable. Have a look what we found out, courtesy of Mr. Jordan.
In Formula One, there's a fine line between victory and defeat. A good team strategy can make the difference. The final round in Brazil last year proved how tight the battle can be, with Lewis Hamilton winning in the last corner of the last lap. With competition now as fierce as ever, teams will do all they can to ensure nothing is left to chance.
One thing you're never short of in Formula One is information. We've got the means to generate all sorts of data, and it's a question of how we boil that down into simple decisions about what we're going to do. We build models of the cars, of each individual driver, and we put them on the circuit, and we have a race, a virtual race. If you do it in that manner once, you'll get a very inaccurate result. If you do it 6 million times, average the output, then you hopefully get something which is better than you and I can guess. That's the theory.
We start a long time before we get to the event. We have a reasonably long meeting that reviews last year's race. It also weighs in safety car risk, tyre performance, weather, all those sort of factors. So we come here with a rough idea where we think we're going to stop, and also where we think everybody else is going to stop and what they're going to do.
The one-stop strategy, 16 seconds away from...
So last night I would have been presenting all of the simulations that I'd run all of the weekend, saying how other cars could beat our car and how our car could try and beat other cars, and then basically just trying to get some discussions, so just trying to beat some ideas off the engineers and coming up with what we think are the strategy for both cars, and then we'll go into qualifying hopefully in Q3 and with a good strategy on the front row.
How you go through qualifying, what fuel load you're going to run in the final qualifying session really dictates when you're going to stop in the race. There's always a temptation to feel good on Saturday. There's always a temptation to go light in Q3. I think you've got to have confidence in what you're doing and decide, am I here to try and grandstand on a Saturday, or am I here trying to put ourselves in a winning position? We give him a package, and his job is to go out there and exploit it to 100% of its performance envelope.
Lewis Hamilton on pole position. It's a 1-2 for McLaren.
During the race I'm upstairs. We've also got the other strategists in Woking. There'll be 3 of them back there doing the other cars and actually looking at fuel flow timings and monitoring gaps between cars to make sure we're not going to come out into traffic.
They try and anticipate the what if there's a safety car, what if it starts to rain, what if you have a puncture, and those sorts of questions, so that hopefully when we need the help on the pit wall, they're there to give us that advice.
A light on the gantry, they're out, and away goes Hamilton and Kovalainen. Barrichello to the inside.
During the race itself, of course, the real world never pans out like the theoretical world, and then we have to respond tactically.
And Barrichello's through into the lead.
Those tyres are coming out really late. The tyres are not ready, they're still in their blankets.
Ultimately, when it all happens in a race, you sometimes have a window which is 5 or 10 seconds where you've got to make a decision, and you've got to make that decision because if you don't, the car whistles past the entry to the pit lane and it all goes horribly wrong. I think we invested in this area probably before the other teams, and inevitably I think we had an advantage. Progressively, whatever you do in Formula One, if it proves to be successful, it spreads and it becomes less of a differentiating approach, and you've got to look for new ones.
I know other people who've worked in strategy for other teams, so it's always good to sort of get one over on them, and I'm sure they enjoy the same when they do it to us as well. When you're on pole in Q3 with a healthy fuel load, when the fuel loads come out, it's definitely quite rewarding.
And they made it on pole, didn't they, 7 days ago? In fact, they locked out the front row. It couldn't have been a better qualifying session for McLaren 7 days ago, but how will it go today? Just over 20 minutes until qualifying begins. But let's take a wander, Eddie, and I'm intrigued to know how different the whole sort of strategy element of Formula One is from the year that you began.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be probably banned from McLaren again because I found that piece absolute nonsense. I've never met such rubbish in my life. 50 guys sitting beside machines, playing games all week. There is no substitute for experience, for your heart and your head, and that is how the strategy works effectively. You can never dictate who's coming out in the grid, who's going to be in front of you, about being slowed down for tyres. This, for me, is nonsense. You want to save money, get rid of them.
OK, well, David, you won races using that kind of strategy work. Do you agree with Eddie?
Well, I think there's a happy balance, isn't it? There seems to be, it's not just the guys you see at the track now. You have these operational rooms back at the factory, which how many people are in working over the weekend. And I think that you can keep running, I think as Martin Whitmarsh said, 6 million simulations for you can take it to 12, you can take it to 24. Where do you stop? Do we want to keep it pure? Do we want to have it man against man, team against team? I think that there has to be a sensible pill on how much you spent on all of this simulation technology.
Well, it sounds like all Eddie wants is a piece of paper and a pen. Are you telling us you did no strategy at Jordan? You just sat there and said to the guys, well, I'll go and race, see how it goes?
I think what was the big advantage to Jordan, and certainly not blowing Gary Anderson's trumpet, he was the most experienced. He'd been there from Formula Ford. He had a very good feel for what was happening on the track, and there is no substitute for that, because you can never legislate when a car exits the pits who's going to be in front of you. How can you do that, no matter what simulations you have? And for me, this is absolute madness.
Can't you marry up both?
I don't think so. I wouldn't want to spend the money, but then I never did that sort of thing. I spent it on other things. But I think this is a complete and absolute madness and waste of money.
I suppose it was the human element, though, that did get involved in McLaren's race with the whole situation with the tyres at the pit stop and Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, there's no question that was a miscommunication between driver and team. What I think was great about that piece, actually, is to show the changing face of McLaren. We would never have had access like that in the past. And here we are, half a season on, and we're getting access to their simulation department. So it's great stuff.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's have a little mention to a little chat with a guy who's done very well so far this weekend, Giancarlo Fisichella. Giancarlo, great to see you. 8th in free practice today. Anyone would think that you're driving to impress Ferrari?
Well, that's just a rumor so far. Until Ferrari don't call me, I'm not concentrate on that. I'm just concentrate to do my best with the Force India team. The car made a big step forward in the last race, so we are much closer. And so we hope to do well. Our target is to score points. We'll see if everything could happen here.
There you go, they've got a strategy.
Well, yeah, absolutely, strategy, they understand very well. But just if I may, because every single born male in Italy, their dream when they go to sleep is to drive for Ferrari. You must be exactly the same.
I will be exactly the same. But I'm still, as you know...
sure.
We'll see if there is a call, everything could happen, but... as I told you, nobody called me, and I'm just concentrating on that.
And in particular, Monza. I mean, the two things married together, an Italian, Ferrari, Monza, it's like fairy tale stuff. So if it happens, good luck to you.
Eddie's clearly telling you that you'd like to do it. Let's talk about Force India, though. Many people forget that they had an engine deal at the very, very last minute before this season began. So it was testing when the season started, and the rate of development's been quite incredible. How good do you think this car is now? Is it good enough to score Force India's first ever points?
Well, first of all, it's impressive the job they've done so far, because we start with the development very late, and with our budget, which is not big as most of the other teams, we did a fantastic job. We made maybe the best job so far compared to all the other teams. everything could happen. It's close. If we can get another step, I think we can consistently maybe get in Q2, why not in Q1, and score points.
You're obviously a very experienced driver now. Are you satisfied?
Less than you.
Less than me, of course, but are you satisfied to be chasing to try and get that 1 point, or are you looking up and down the pit lane to try and find another berth for next year?
Well, yeah, it's still too early to say. I didn't find nothing so far, and I didn't call any other teams. First thing is growing up, but obviously I want to. If I want to race one more year, I need to be in a competitive team, and otherwise I'll think about that. So we'll see in the next few races if I am able to do well, to find another seat, or stay with Force India if they can grow up again.
You've been around a long time, Giancarlo. Have you ever known so much confusion this far into a season, not just over the teams that will be racing next year, but all the drivers as well? There's only 3 or 4 seats that have been confirmed for next year, and drivers are clearly walking up and down the paddock saying to each other, have you been speaking to this team? Have you had a word with that team?
Yeah, it's very confusing now to understand most of the drivers' places now. There are a lot of experienced drivers with no contract for next year. There are a lot of young drivers too, so everything could happen. We'll see. I'm confident.
Giancarlo, traditionally at Spa we have about 4 seasons in one afternoon, and this is no exception. This particular weekend you've been on the podium with Jordan in '97, and you've won for us in Brazil in similar kind of changing circumstances. Surely this is the kind of weekend that you dream about.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, with Jordan, 1997 was my first real season, and we scored second. Was a fantastic result in a fantastic circuit. I like the circuit; it's one of my favorite. So I think everything could happen, especially with the weather condition changing quite quickly. It's important to be there in the qualifying session in the first 4 or 5 rows, 6 rows, and then go through the end of the race and pushing maximum as I can.
OK, Fissy, listen, you've got qualifying to get ready for. Less than 20 minutes until that gets going. But if you do speak to Ferrari this week, and if you do sign for Ferrari, the BBC gets the exclusive. Is that cool?
OK, that's the deal. OK.
All right, nice to chat to you.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
Go well today. And, of course, that's one of Eddie's former drivers. But another one got his first win in 5 years last weekend. And what do you want to do when you've got your first win in all that time? Have a couple of days off and have a nice lie-in. But not if you've got guests arriving.
No doorbell, trying to make sure the police don't come in. How are you? Brilliant. Well, the plan today, if we can get him out of bed, is going to go and play some golf.
Good morning. That's the last time my pool is going to be clean.
He didn't see it, but it was very good. Nearly killed the cameraman.
Eddie's trying to convince us that's the only bad shot of golf he played all weekend. An awful lot of slapping going on there with Rubens. Did you used to slap your drivers quite a bit?
He was with me for 4 years. His father told me to make sure that I become his surrogate father while he was away in Brazil, and I think that followed on in that piece only goes to show the way I used to treat him.
Well, you can see exactly what happened when Eddie met up with Rubens tomorrow. Just going back to Giancarlo, he's obviously being very coy. He's trying to say the right thing. He's driving for another team. He's an Italian. It's Monza in 2 weeks. If Ferrari are sniffing around, I mean, he wouldn't not go, would he?
Of course not. He would love to drive for Ferrari, and there's absolutely no doubt about that at all. But I simply don't think they will approach him. They have Marc Genet within the team. They have other options that Eddie obviously has highlighted earlier in the show. So unfortunately for Fizzy, I think it will just remain a dream. OK, right, our pre-qualifying show hasn't got too long to run until the cars are out on track. But chicanes. Last year, Lewis Hamilton learned to his cost just what happens if you blow a chicane. He missed the bus stop and he got demoted from first to third. Miss them and you're in trouble. Get them right and you can pick up a lot of lap time.
Chicanes, there's always plenty of time to be won or lost. Like a road car, under heavy braking, a Formula 1 car dives as weight transfers forward. The rear goes light and it's easy to lock the rear wheels. But you have to attack the braking zones. There's so much time to be gained, as this overlay shows. Doing it right feels good. The back's a bit light on the way in, but it turns in. Direction change is good, and through the exit nicely. the suspension must be supple enough to cope with the curbs. Look at the tyres wobbling and the wings flexing in protest. The exit is all about controlling wheel spin. All of the power goes through the rear tyres, so be smooth on the throttle.
Right, there might be plenty of opportunities to overtake at this circuit, but as it doesn't make a decent position on the grid any less important. In fact, what you need to do is get your nose in front right at the start and avoid a kind of David Coulthard-style pile-up at the very first corner. It makes qualifying essentially important, and this is what the drivers feel about racing at such a fantastic old circuit.
The Belgian Grand Prix at Spa is a phenomenal track. First time I raced here was 96 in my Formula Ford, and it still is just exhilarating to take the Formula 1 car around there.
Spa means the best circuit in the world so far. Some real corners that sorts the boys out of men, and you know, they're not easy corners, not flat out corners. It's just about flat out, but not quite. So you've got to try to find a good balance in your car, be a bit brave, and then hope for the best.
Tight last source to start the lap, very easy to get your braking wrong there, to overshoot, but then you've got that exhilarating run down to Eau Rouge, which is just incredible, full throttle through Eau Rouge, and the elevation you come out the top it is absolutely just it's like a roller coaster.
It's a fantastic feeling always here in Spa. It's a track we enjoy, we have fun driving here, and Eau Rouge is a special corner. Now with these days, with the grip we have is flat out, so it's a little bit easier than it was in the past, but still feeling a good compression in your body.
10-11, so it basically is called Pujon, and it's very quick, around 250 kilometers an hour. So you arrive 7th and then downshift 1 gear, so it's one of the most challenging places around the track.
You just have to lift, no brake. Got to have the confidence to lift, downshift 1, and have the confidence the car's going to be beneath it. Sometimes, you know, the wrist sticks out and you've got to correct it and you're off. So it's seriously, probably that's the corner that your heart's mostly in your mouth.
It's a combination of a danger and a fantastic layout of corners, and that makes always a very nice surprise when we go out and to go through Eau Rouge. This morning I took it flat the first lap, and that was amazing. It just gave me a really good feeling.
And it gives you a really good feeling to stand here and watch the cars going up Eau Rouge, which you can see there. It's a bit like standing and watching a jet fighter take off just a few feet away from you. But talking about it on the television doesn't really do justice to how steep that incline is. So we thought, how can we let people know just what it's like to drive up there? Well, we decided to get hold of a young lad that made Eddie Jordan look like less of a rock star. He was pretty cool. And this is what he did for us on Eau Rouge yesterday. Take a look.
I'd like to be a young rocker like you. You're quite cool, aren't you?
Well, Axel, welcome to the most famous part of probably the world's most famous race circuit. What do you reckon? First impressions of Eau Rouge?
Yeah, it's pretty steep.
Just a bit, particularly when you're going to skateboard down it. So the cars, they go through here very fast indeed, probably, I don't know, 300 kilometres an hour. What sort of speed do you reckon you'll get coming the other way?
Maybe 30, I don't know.
You're a brave guy. What about a helmet, no? You don't fancy wearing a helmet?
No.
You think that'll keep your head safe?
Yeah, this is okay, you know.
You reckon? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So how long have you been skating for?
6 years now.
And you're the European champion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as the European skateboarding champion, have you ever done anything like this before?
No.
Have you ever seen anyone skateboard Eau Rouge?
No.
That's because you, my friend, are doing a world first. This has never been done before, and I've had about enough of the hiking. So Axel, I'm going to shake you by the hand and wish you all the very best, and I'll see you at the bottom.
Okay.
All right. Just don't look down, okay?
Yeah.
So how was that? Tell us how that was.
Crazy.
Well, if there's one way to feel very uncool, it's to hang out with Axel for a bit. Driving up it at 300 kilometres an hour or coming down it on a skateboard at 50 kilometres an hour. What would you prefer?
Oh, definitely driving. I was really nervous for him. You had no elbow pads or anything, but I guess if you're the European champion, you've learned how to fall, so he was a pretty cool kid, as you say.
Also Eau Rouge, the European champion, hey? And actually we all went down there to watch it, Eddie, and it was quite mind-blowing watching him do that. And it just shows how incredible these circuits are, and it's very hard for people on the television. You don't really get an idea of just how steep that is.
Well, that's the whole point. I think what was very clever was to try and give an indication of the movement down that. It's absolutely like a cliff face, as Martin said yesterday. It is a seriously big climb, and it's a pity the camera can't give that value to the people at home, but it is an awesome corner. For me, absolutely the best corner in Formula 1.
Right, qualifying in under 10 minutes. Stay with us. And one guy who likes taking on the challenge of Eau Rouge, and in fact the challenge of Spa, is Kimi Räikkönen. The past couple of races we've almost missed the point that he's finished fantastically well, a couple of podiums, but we've been concentrating on Brawn and Red Bull, I suppose. How well is he driving now compared to the start of the season, David, when Eddie was constantly questioning his desire and his drive?
Yeah, I think he's definitely upped his game. At the beginning of the year, he just seemed to be lacking a little bit of drive. He'd realised the car wasn't very quick, but I think that he's realised his reputation and maybe long-term contracts at stake, so he's delivered some great results.
I got it wrong again, as normal. Or at least we gave him the inspiration to improve. He is a changed man, and he is driving fantastically well.
OK, and so is Lewis Hamilton. He's having a great turnaround in fortunes for his season so far. Let's have a quick catch-up with him before qualifying begins. He's talking with Ted.
Lewis, how's it looking going into qualifying? Because I understand from the team there's a little problem at the end of morning practice.
No, I didn't really have any problems. Had a slow puncher at the end of practice, but it's been quite productive, and I don't know if we definitely don't have the pace of some of the others, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in qualifying. The others seem to be quite a bit quicker than us, especially in the middle sector. So we're losing around a second somewhere, so we have to find it.
Thanks, Lewis.
Well, Lewis says they're not as quick as the other teams. It seems that Kurz is working well to get them out in the first sector and back in the third sector, but it's the second sector that is causing real problems for McLaren, David. What do you think the issue is?
Well, the middle sector is a mighty section. A lot of medium speed and high speed corners. So, their car simply doesn't generate the downforce and grip of Red Bull or maybe the Brawn.
OK, so struggles for McLaren, but BMW went very well indeed in the final part of practice. Nick Heidfeld was the quickest, and here's the BMW team principal, Mario Tyson.
Mario, thoughts before qualifying here in Spa?
Well, Spa is a special place. The weather especially is unpredictable, sort of unpredictable. Anything can happen. So far, I'm happy with the performance of the car. Apparently, we are in a better shape than in the previous races, and I hope we can get both cars into Quali 3.
How ironic is that BMW have announced that they will be pulling out at the end of this season? Last week didn't actually seem so bad in comparison to some of the other races you've had this year.
Yeah, it's. I've always said we are trying to catch up, pushing very hard. That's what we do, and I hope we will have some good results in the second half of the season.
So important for BMW's future to go well for the rest of the season. The same applies to Toyota, actually, Eddie. They're sitting second and fourth after free practice. They need to show some good form running into the end of 2009.
Well, Toyota is a big surprise. One week they can be absolutely at the front and they can be at the back just as easy than the next race. And it's decision time. There's a lot of people asking questions. Are they going to be there? We saw what Jarno Trulli is about to say. Is there a second year in this or not? I wouldn't hold my breath. It's a big call for Toyota.
Right, so Toyota and BMW are fast. Lewis says that McLaren are a bit slow. As for Red Bull and Brawn, well, we still don't know, do we? It's shaping up to be very nice indeed. Just a reminder that you can watch qualifying on the BBC Sport website, but right now it's time to hand over to Martin Brundle and Jonathan Ledyard for the first part of qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix.